Technologies like AI and GenAI are developing at breakneck speed. How can insurers keep up and find the best opportunities to deploy these technologies? How to embed them across the organization, prepare your workforce and make sure they're being used in a secure and responsible manner. Here to share his perspective and learnings is David Knibbe, CEO at NN Group, one of Europe's leading insurance companies serving 20 million customers in 11 countries. Get ready for the future of insurance. Please welcome David Knibbe.
So David, Bettina said it all. AI is going to change the industry. So what kind of applications do you see short term?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Very happy to be here for a little bit of time. Well, we're preaching here obviously to the converted, so let's not do a whole thing on the relevance of it. We put an enormous amount of effort in scaling. I think everybody talks about all these new initiatives. We've been talking about scaling. And that was quite a journey, to be honest. So let me give a few examples, and I think some of them are well known. So whenever you call our call center, automatically the call is logged and put into our system, and it saves around 3.5 minutes per call. So that's 7 million minutes that we save because of this application.
That sounds like a lot of FTE.
It is a lot of FTE. Yeah, no, I'm sure we'll get to that.
A lot of bottom line results probably, right?
I think when AI became more mainstream, a lot was about innovation and growth. I think the reality is that today a lot is around efficiency still. Another example is people often think with insurance around motor, car insurance, but big blocks of business are life insurance and pension. And that means customers have been with us, 30 years? And since then, a lot happened, right? With tax changes, government changes, people may be divorced, maybe they moved out of the country, and then they have a question. And it's very complex to answer these questions. So we're now linking our internal databases with ChatGPT, which means that our colleagues can now almost immediately answer a question. Sounds pretty trivial maybe, but if you have 30 years of history of one customer with all sorts of policies, these type of efficiencies, they make a big difference.
I think it also improves customer engagement, improves the way that your employees are able to work, their job satisfaction and things like that.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. No, I think not everybody enjoys digging back into old administrational systems, so they get to spend time on things they enjoy more.
And talking to customers.
Yes,
that's where it makes money at the end of the day.
Yeah.
The first thing you said is scaling. Is that one of the key success factors in the things that you do, or how you select your projects?
Yes, we also went through quite a journey many years ago, and as large companies, you always have these corporate labs, and then you have some very cool people that come up with cool stuff. As board members, you visit them and you're all impressed, and you think, great, we're doing really well here. Only to discover that those same people will then go to one of your business units or one of your countries, who then say to you, this is really nice. Very good, but I'm really busy right now, I don't know, launching a new product, migrating a system, I have GDPR coming. So, you know what, there's this other unit that I think it will fit really well. And essentially nothing happens. And I think whenever you ask large companies on AI, I would always recommend you to ask them, what have you scaled already? Because we all have these little innovative pockets, but scaling is where you should spend all of your time, not on which language model. I saw some study, 10% on technology, 20% on the data, 70% on business application. And typically, when large companies and companies start, you do it the other way around. You spend all your time on data, and which technology and which language model, and then the scaling doesn't happen.
And then you got two challenges in scaling, I guess. On the one hand, making sure that things move from pilot to something that's really operational. But you also have the size of the company in terms of countries that right. How do you take that into account?
Yeah, I think there's two things very important. I think one is, as a board or as a CEO, it's just basically decisions that you need to take, or as we say, capital allocation decision, which is, capital is not unlimited, as we all know, so where are you going to invest? And the other part is culture. culture of a company that you have and that needs to facilitate this. And I think if you think about capital allocation, I'm sure there's people here in the room and they say, you know, I had this great pitch and this board or this CEO, he doesn't listen, they're idiots, they don't understand, they're probably dinosaurs. And you know, some of that's probably true. But there's also another side. If you put a little bit yourself in, for example, in my shoes, you know, a day could start with somebody coming and say, you know, this is all around NPS, this is all around customers, so you need to invest in customer journeys. And then the next person will come and say, you know, brand. You know, you've seen Apple, you've seen Nike, you need to invest more in brand because then, you know, you'll be more successful. And then the next one the investors will come and say, well, you know, you really haven't been paying a lot of dividend lately, so can you maybe do some share buybacks? And then somebody will come with AI. So the pitch is not only around, you know, is AI a good idea? So I think when you're pitching these things, don't think only to talk about, you know, why is this a good idea, but also why is this more important than other things. So one thing is capital allocation that we need to do, and the other thing is culture. So what type of culture do you have in countries and units that actually facilitates that new ideas are welcome instead of rejected, which is the eternal challenge of a large company.
I think the things that you mentioned also sort of create a foundation to also think about not only applying AI for productivity, but also to create additional growth.
Yes.
Can you share a bit more about what you're doing in that space?
Yeah, so so we started with growth, then we went to efficiency, now we're back on investing in growth. And I think the coolest example I have seen is, so we have many tied agent channels. You know, we probably have around 10,000 agents across many markets like Greece and Spain and Poland and you know, many countries. And the big challenge there is how do you get these agents more efficient? And so what we have built is an AI model where we much more actively steer the agents on which customer to go to when. And this worked in one country, we've rolled it out in the other countries, and now 30% of their business actually comes out of this model. And that's a big step up for us, you know, 30%, and then all of this started during COVID. And 30% means some countries are at 10, some are at 70. So I'm convinced there's still a much bigger wave to come. Next step is what we're building now is, all right, so we have these 10,000 agents, now they're talking to the customer at the right moment, but what are they going to say? Now, obviously you need to train them, but yeah, 10,000 people, I mean, who knows what they're going to say, right? So we're now building this internal chatbot where actually also when the agent is speaking to the customer, actually the input of the customer also goes into this chatbot, and while the agent is speaking, he will get input on product suggestions, next best actions, or other activities. And I think that is the next frontier on not only getting the agent there, but also facilitating the conversation. And obviously the next step is then also building the direct interaction between the agent and the company in a much more digital way to fully streamline. And ultimately that will lead to a lot more productivity. But also agents will enjoy it more because they basically like talking to customers and not doing all the other stuff that currently we still force them to spend a lot of time on, which is meeting all sorts of regulatory stuff.
So it's more conversations, it's better conversations,
yeah.
Ultimately higher conversion rates, more revenues.
Yeah,
now
it's really simple actually.
Yeah, well, you know, like, I think that, of course, none of the agents or brokers could do that by themselves. So what you're providing is actually sort of superpowers that they now can use without having them in, well, they never could have done it by themselves.
Yeah, and I think that also applies to our unit. So in the, you know, you always have this not invented here syndrome, so you'll find a unit, Spain or whatever, and it says, you know, we can do this better than others, and we want to do best practice sharing, and that means I will explain what I'm doing wonderfully to all the others. But there could be less openness to do. Now, everybody knows that when we're dealing with these type of innovations, no unit can do this by themselves. And that makes it also, the scalability, a lot more interesting now.
Yeah, on the one hand, interesting. On the other, I can also think that given the size of your company and being there for over 200 years, close to 200 years, that also is a challenge. You know, how do you keep up with all those new developments in a company of that size?
Yeah, that's difficult. I think indeed we existed over 185 years, and so obviously we constantly need to adapt. and you constantly have choices to make. I already talked about, capital allocation decision, where you're going to invest, and that often means where you're not going to invest is a lot more difficult to figure out than where you're going to invest. And I think we've spent a lot of time on this, and so with my team and all the CEOs of the countries, we went through this whole educational program, because we constantly talk about the organization needs to transform, people need to transfer, society's transforming, but obviously, I didn't grow up in this world, my team didn't grow up in this world, so we need to change. And so we went through this year program, with MIT, and I'm sure some of you will think, well, that we've heard before, right? Executives will go to a week of MIT and you put it on LinkedIn and you're done. But this is a full year program, only to discover how difficult it is to do all these business cases again, and all this reading and education. So we went through a full year program with the business unit CEOs, and that created a real platform to have these conversations on how do we continue to innovate ourselves. And that really started with us, and not with the rest of the organization.
That's about engaging your leadership team. I can imagine that you also, at some point, did you adapt your strategy or something like that?
Yeah, we did. So we had as we call the 5 commitments, and we changed, after the whole program we went through, we changed one of the 5 commitments about being a leader in digital and AI. And that has facilitated a lot of the discussions, because, as I said, the culture is important. Decisions as a board on where you put priority is important, but if you don't educate the rest of the organization and take them along, nothing will happen, because you will have very good people and you will say yes, go do, and then I hear people say, well, the CEO needs to be very clear on it. It doesn't work like that. If you're somewhere in a country and you're busy with stuff, if you haven't taken your own workforce along, these wonderful people with their wonderful ideas are just going to run into brick walls. And I think, so we have built guilds. We are going through this whole education of our own company. We've built guilds around, data science, certain topics, where experts throughout the company work together to create this energy on getting the whole organization moving.
And you do that for all 16,000 employees?
Yes, so we haven't reached the last employee. So we're currently doing a data literacy program running through the company, and so we'll have multiple versions. Takes time to train everybody, but it is very important, and I think everybody talks about training. I don't know how many companies have actually trained up to the last employee, but we're well on our way, and there is no doubt that this needs to happen if you want to have any chance of success here.
Yeah, back to culture, it's not just about skills, probably also about mindset.
Yeah.
Can you share a bit more about how you do that within those...
Yeah, I've been amazed actually, and I take no credit for this, by the way. So while we were going through the MIT program for a year, trying to figure out, what to do, we had an AI team that was, already very active on this. And well before ChatGPT, they reached out to OpenAI and said, is there going to be a Dutch version of it, a Dutch language model? OpenAI said no. So we kind of thought that was the end of it, and then they came back a week later and said, well, maybe we can co-develop this. And so this team has been co-developing that. It's also when Satya Nadella launched the ChatGPT, you saw the NN logo there, so now we're in co-pilot, we're in the next phase with them. But this was really without me knowing about it. Right, so I think by talking a lot about it, trying to educate ourselves, it did create a platform where people, felt the freedom to start doing these things. This happens more often in large companies. Some of it will be completely screwed up, but some of it will be very successful. And I think this was the culture that we have tried to create, and without me knowing. So by the time I got on board and actually thought this is a good idea, turns out we already had quite a few capabilities, something to be very proud of, but not scaled. And I think that's where then we play a role in trying to get the scaling.
Yeah, so get things rolling, get the snowball effect going.
Yeah.
And that's about guilds, you mentioned some. So what happens in those guilds?
Yeah, I think so. What we've seen is that, and I'm sure some of the people are here in the room, we have some very smart people that know very well in their field, but then they have to work in a business unit or in a company, and they're surrounded by people that are busy with other stuff, and they might feel lonely at times. So we've been fairly successful in attracting people, but keeping them in and keeping them engaged in a large organization that has been there for almost 200 years is not always easy. So guilds is one way to build a community where they can share, they talk to each other, talk about practices, and further educate themselves in their own field. And this goes across functions, across units, across geographies. And I think it has been a very good initiative that, again, I take no credit for. I mean, it came out of the organization. I'm very happy, I'm very supportive of it. But I think it's one of the things that you need to make sure that it's well embedded in the organization.
As a sort of a formal, informal network
Yeah.
where people just help each other.
And it's not in your chart, it doesn't line up, there's no reporting, but it is a very effective way of feeling people at home in their own field and talk to their colleagues on the daily issues that they have that they could probably not talk to if you're just in the life company or in a non-life or in the bank.
Does it also, because there's this elephant in the room when we talk about AI, is it going to cost me my job? Is that also something that people get more accustomed? What is your view on that?
I think it is it's something to be aware of. I mean, if you're rolling out some of these efficiency things, you can sense that there will be some hesitation with people say, well, if we do this, I might be out of a job or I might be partially out of a job. I think so far we've seen more that parts of jobs are being become more efficient, not full jobs. But the reality is that, because of all these, all this technology, jobs will disappear. But this is nothing new. I mean, if you look at the financial sector in the last 20 years, with the, portals are coming, apps were coming, customers starting to do in a way their own admin. From that point of view, there's nothing new. If you look at the size of our company in terms of people, I mean, we acquired Deltaloid here in the Dutch market, for example. We acquired Real. But people-wise, we're probably roughly now the same size as we were before these takeovers. And so there's different jobs, there is more interesting jobs, but the reality is that some operational jobs are disappearing. But by the way, this has been really ongoing for more than 20 years.
I think it also with I think also that with your programs that you have in place for your 60,000 employees, that there's also a way to reskill and re-educate and things like that.
No, I think there's a lot of attempts on reskilling, but let's be honest, it's not for everybody.
No.
I mean, we cannot upskill everybody. So there is a lot of effort put in that. I think there's mixed success, but in some cases it leads to essentially people finding another job. Now, the very good situation, I think, in Europe and certainly in most of the markets that we operate in almost full employment markets. So, you take proper care of people when you have to say goodbye to them, and we track also how it goes, and the vast majority actually finds another job. And I might add, often a job they enjoy more, because they've been for a very long time in operational jobs, and they get to rethink on what I want to do. So full employment in these countries helps to, to accommodate this change. And at the same time, we're hiring people. Right, so I mean, we continue also to hire people, so it's a mixed bag.
Yeah, also to get those new competencies in.
Yes.
Yeah. Another issue is, of course, the regulatory concerns, the societal concerns. What is your take on that? For instance, one that I think that, in particular, in a multi-channel organization that you have, the human touch is so important. The feeling side of customer conversations and things like that. Yeah. So how do you balance that out?
Yeah, it's a good question and a difficult one. I think, first of all, if you look at, some of you might know the Edelman Trust Barometer that talks about trust in society. It's been measured for, 30, 40 years. And there's always a lot of criticism on companies, certainly large companies. The reality is, if you see those measurements, then the only ones that are seen to be trustworthy and competent are large companies. So not NGOs, not politicians, not media, not the government. Large companies. So we still have, relatively speaking, high trust, and that is something that we really need to preserve also in all these transformation. I think that is one. Two, I mean, last week I was in Japan, where we met with let's say the 40 large insurance companies from Asia, the US. Europe has a lot more regulation to deal with than the US and China and the rest of Asia. So it means that also we have a bigger challenge to implement all of this in the context of all the regulation that is there. At the same time, some of this regulation is good, because when we think about AI, we often think about, can we technically do it? That's one. Two, are we legally allowed? But then three is, do we want this? And we've had instances where we said, yes, we can do it. Yes, legally allowed. we probably don't want to do this. Because if this comes into the newspaper and people feel that we're tracking them online or we're doing stuff online, customers might get uncomfortable.
So these 3 criteria are sort of an ethical framework that you have in place?
Yeah. So they're part of our ethical framework, and they play a role in shutting down some things that, again, meet the first 2, not the third one. And I think that's because we really want to try and maintain a high trust, which is obviously in insurance vitally important that we remain, a trustworthy company. But yeah, if you define AI as non-biological intelligence, we're going to have some serious challenges along the way on guardrailing AI in the future. So I think we've only seen the beginning of regulation here.
But apart from regulation, having an ethical framework in place such as you have, that certainly does the job.
It helps a lot for now. But also we need to continue to evolve whether we see this is also going forward when, at some point a lot of these things are going to be smarter than humans. And then the question raises, how do you control this as society? And this is obviously not just regulation, but also a kind of an ethical and moral debate. And, I'm pretty sure we're only at the beginning of this. But for now, the ethical framework that we use, especially the third question, do we really want this, works well for us.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect conclusion to end this conversation. Thank you very much, and lots of food for thought for the break.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Have fun.